You know it's this. Take a perk and a talk of that shit. Money swallowed like sis. Did it perfect in the kid. Got a billion who sang on my head. Look up better put on the road I just spent. I know we got $1 million. The devil that shit ain't not cheaper again.
Hello and welcome back, fellow anime lovers, to MangaMuse. I am delighted to have you join us once again in the world of fanfiction and fantasy. This is the first part of What If Naruto Enters Danny Phantom with Dandadan. Special note, this fanfic is written and a masterpiece of KFB Anime 87 on fanfiction.net. Do check and support the author too. Now smash the like, share and subscribe button for more. Also press the bell icon so that you never miss such great parts. Thanks for the introduction. Now let's dive into the world. Naruto and Danny looked up as the ground beneath them began to shake. They looked up and a large ghost emerged before them with a blazing crown atop his head reaching towards them. Naruto and Danny smirked, running towards the ghost. Dandadan. Amity Park. It was a normal day in the town of Amity Park, and in front of a house with a for sale sign in front of it, was a moving truck, where several movers were moving everything into the house, while a car parked in the garage and the driver got out. Said driver was a 6 feet tall teenager who had 3 whisker-like markings on his face, blue ocean eyes, blonde spiky hair. Some would say he would look American, but the individual is actually of Asian descent. He wore a mixture of traditional street clothing, mixed together, wearing a short black and orange kimono with a red swirl being held by a 9-tailed fox on the back, and orange lightning bolts on the front. He was wearing a black t-shirt under it, with the number 9 on it, and around his neck was a thin necklace with 2 silver ball and a jade emerald on it. Around his hands and wrist are wrapping, but having Japanese kanji on them translates to something, but also having prayer beads on his wrist, showing that his religion was Buddhism. He wore black jeans with a chain sticking out and combat boots with orange on the bottom heel. This was Naruto Uzumaki, age 17. "Okay, we're here," Naruto said, as he looked into the back of the car. A young girl of about 14 years old got out of the car and walked out of the garage to take a look at the neighborhood. She had red hair that reached the back of her neck. She wore a typical schoolgirl outfit, consisting of a white blouse with a yellow sweater vest, a green striped tie, a red plaid skirt, and black boots with white buckles. She was also wearing white gloves and a trench coat with a cloak-like end. This was Himawari Uzumaki, Naruto's little sister. "So this is where we were shipped off by the hag and the pervert?" Himawari said with an annoyed tone, as she looked around at the neighborhood, obviously not impressed with what she saw. She paused, as she looked at a building across the street, which was a normal 2-story building, with a neon sign saying, Fenton Works, on it, along with what looked like a large high-tech building on the roof. "Well, at least we don't stand out. Right, sis?" Naruto asked with a sheepish chuckle at seeing the odd building across the street. "Give it time. Pretty soon, everyone will know that I'm from a family of freaks," Himawari said with a scoff, as she walked away from Naruto and made her way into the house, while the movers came out after putting everything inside. Naruto frowned at this, as he decided not to say anything, as he knew his little sister didn't mean what she said. At least, he hoped that was the case. You see, Naruto and his sister come from a family that for generations, going all the way back to the feudal era, they have been involved in the world of the spiritual and dealing with spirits and apparitions, whether that meant exorcising them or helping them move on to the afterlife. And while Naruto was taking up the family business, his sister, well, she wasn't exactly a fan of what her family did. Not that she didn't believe in ghosts or apparitions, she just had a bit of a chip on her shoulder, regarding what had happened 4 years ago. Naruto sighed as he thought about the past, as he entered the house, and as he entered the house, his phone started to go off. Naruto picked it up, and after looking at it, he saw the caller ID said the words, "Ba-chan," on the screen. "Hello Ba-chan," Naruto said, as he put the phone to his ear. "I thought I told you not to Ba-chan me, you brat." An older woman's voice yelled out. This was Tsunade, Naruto and Himawari's grandmother. "Hey, it's better than what Hima calls you," Naruto said, as he slightly winced and pulled the phone away from his ear from the volume. DMN brat, Tsunade said after a few moments of silence, before she sighed. Yeah, she wasn't exactly happy when I told her about the move, right after we got done with that talk show, Naruto said with a sigh, as he sat down on a couch. Was this before or after she asked that woman on that show to contact Minato and Kushina on the other side? Tsunade asked curiously. After. And while she wasn't happy that it ended in a dead end, she at least waited until we left to cuss me out, Naruto said with a sigh. That girl has her mom's tongue, Tsunade said with a sigh at this. Yeah. Hopefully she can have a fresh start here, Naruto said, as he nodded in agreement. Don't forget to do what we sent you there to do, Tsunade said with a firm tone. Right. Find out why the spiritual activity has gotten so high here, Naruto said with a frown. Right. From what some of our mediums are saying, the afterlife is going crazy, because of something going on in that town, Tsunade said, reminding Naruto of why they moved there. What does Jiraiya think is going on? Naruto asked curiously. Most likely a high-level apparition or spirit is causing it. So feel free to go all out, if you have to, Tsunade said with a firm tone. Naruto sighed at this as he nodded at this, when he heard some thudding coming from upstairs, before what sounded like shouts and laughs. Well, at least Hima seems to be getting used to her new room, he said, as he looked up at the ceiling. Yeah, well, keep me posted on what's going on over there, Tsunade said with a firm tone. Sure thing, BH-on, Naruto said with a teasing grin. Oi, I said not to BH-on me, you mother dash, Tsunade was yelling, before Naruto hung up on her. Naruto chuckled at this, as he went upstairs and walked towards Himawari's room, which was labeled as such with a sign that said, knock under penalty of death, in the middle of the door. Gah! Enough with the puns. I'm getting a headache. Himawari was heard yelling from inside her room. Naruto raised an eyebrow at this, before he knocked on the door twice. After a few seconds of silence, the door opened ajar, with Himawari looking up at Naruto. What? She asked with an annoyed tone. I figured that we should get you registered at the high school for your freshman year now, seeing as it's still light out. We can also take a look at the town, if you want, Naruto said with a smile, hoping to encourage his little sister. Himawari rolled her eyes at this, as she looked back into her room for a few moments, before she sighed and looked back at Naruto. Fine. Give me 5 minutes and I'll meet you outside, she said, before she slammed her door shut. Naruto sighed at this, as he went back downstairs to go wait for his sister. Gahahaha. You would think that kid would not hate you by now, a voice said from the back of Naruto's kimono, more specifically, the image of the kitsune on the back. She hates you, not me, Naruto said, as his eyes narrowed at this. Tomato, tomato. Keep telling yourself that brat, the voice said. Later. A little later. Naruto and Himawari were approaching the high school to get them both registered for their junior and freshman years. Casper High? Himawari asked, reading the name of the school on the sign nearby. According to rumors that I heard, it's named after the dead son of the man who donated the funds for this school a long time ago. I think that's his house up on a hill outside town, Naruto said, as he pointed at what looked like a large manor that seemed to be Victorian-made, with 3 towers. Is that another hell hole you're gonna go purge of morons who won't move on? Himawari asked with a raised eyebrow, as the mansion definitely gave off a haunted vibe. That's not on my agenda. Now, let's go and get us registered sis, Naruto said, as he led the way into the school. Himawari shrugged at this, as she entered the school. But as she entered the school, she took note of some students nearby. One was a teen with brown skin, turquoise eyes, black hair and wore black glasses. He wore a long-sleeve yellow shirt, green cargo pants with a black belt, and brown boots along with a red baseball cap backwards and had a large blue backpack. This was Tucker Foley. The other was a fair-skinned teenage Caucasian girl with light violet eyes, thick brows and chin length, with straight black hair that had a small ponytail at the top back of her head, held by a green hair tie, along with M-shaped bangs. She also sported deep violet lipstick on her lips, and was wearing a black choker around her neck, a black cropped tank top with a light violet oval printed on the center, thick black bracelets on both her wrists, purple tights under a black skirt with a green crosshatch design, and large black biker boots with metal-like soles. This was Sam Manson. The final was another teen boy who had fair skin, black hair and blue eyes. He wore a white t-shirt with a thin red collar, red cuffs, and a red oval in the middle, light blue jeans and red and white sneakers. This was Danny Fenton. The three teens seemed to be being confronted by a teen boy with blonde hair and blue eyes, who looked like he played football. This was Dash Baxter. From what Himawari could see, the older teen wearing a varsity jacket was obviously a typical jock, who was attempting to bully the other three students. Himawari watched as Dash picked up Danny by the front of his shirt, causing her eyes to narrow, before she held out her hand and made a clenching motion and pulled her hand up. As she did this, Dash's pants suddenly jerked hard up, as if something invisible was giving the jock an atomic wedgie. "Hey, what the hell is this?" Dash yelled out, as he yelled in pain while dropping Danny, before he fell to his knees in pain from his pants suddenly jerking up, before he wobbled off in a panic. Himawari smirked at this, as she entered the school to follow her brother. "I thought you gave up using your powers on Dash," Sam said to Danny, as Tucker helped him up. "I did." "That wasn't me," Danny said, as he dusted himself off, before looking around for any sign of what had pranked Dash. Later, Naruto and Himawari were in the vice principal's office, sitting in front of the desk of a man, who was looking at their records from Japan. The man wore a blue shirt and a black tie. He was bald with green eyes and a black goatee. This was Mr. Lancer. "Well, Mr. and Miss Uzumaki, from what I'm reading of your academic records, you both seem to be more than qualified to join us at our school. Though I am curious why you two are transferring here in the middle of the school year," Mr. Lancer said, as he looked at Naruto and Himawari with a calculating look. "Our legal guardians decided that us transferring here would be better for us, more specifically, for my sister," Naruto said calmly. "Ah, yes. I had read that your parents died in an accident and in the past few years, your sister has had trouble adjusting," Mr. Lancer said, as he looked at Himawari's file again, before he looked at Himawari with what looked like some sympathy in his eyes. "Yes, and I'm sure she will do her best, while going to school here. Right, sis?" Naruto said, as he looked at his little sister. "Faye," Himawari said as she scoffed at this, before she nodded at this. Lancer said nothing to this, but after a few moments, he sighed. "Very well. Mr. Uzumaki, I'm willing to give you, and more specifically your sister, a chance. So, welcome to Casper High," he said, as he looked at Naruto. "Thank you, sir." "Hima." Naruto said with a nod, before he looked at Himawari. Yeah. Thanks," Himawari said with a roll of her eyes, before she made her way to the door. "Heh, teen girls today," Naruto said with a nervous chuckle, before he quickly ran after his little sister, leaving Mr. Lancer alone in his office. Mr. Lancer shook his head at this, before he pushed an intercom on his desk, which was connected to his secretary. "Have Miss Fenton come into my office, please," Lancer said, as he looked at Naruto's file, taking note that some of his grades were low. Later on, after leaving the school, along with the rest of the school, as it was the end of the school day, the two siblings were now in Naruto's car in the parking lot of what looked like a fast food burger joint. "Nasty burger? Do they actually call that a sales pitch?" Himawari asked, as she and Naruto got out of the car. "Well, I figured you would enjoy having burgers, maybe meet some of the local teens," Naruto said with a smile at his sister, before he led her towards the restaurant. Himawari sighed at this, as she knew her brother was just trying to be nice, so against her better judgment, she followed him into the restaurant. "Okay, I'll order for us, while you get us a table," Naruto said, as he looked at his sister before he approached the register, where an older male was working. "Hello, sir. Would you like to try our plant-grown burgers today?" the man asked with an uninterested tone, as if he had been asking this all day. Naruto raised an eyebrow at this, but before he could respond, the hair on the back of his neck stood up, as if warning him of danger. "Oh goody, the welcoming committee," the voice on Naruto's back said, before cackling loudly while Naruto scowled. A bit earlier with Himawari. Meanwhile with Himawari, she had chosen a booth nearby for her and her brother, and as she sat down, she took a book out of her backpack. She then took note that the 3 teens she had seen being bullied at the school today were sitting in the booth next to hers. "Wait, they have plant-based burgers now. This was you, wasn't it, Sam?" Tucker asked, as he looked at the burger Sam was eating with disgust. "Lots of places are adding meat substitutes these days, Tucker," Sam said with a shrug. "Yeah, after getting a barrage of complaints from your fellow loons," Tucker said, as he took a bite of his own burger. "Hey, at least it's an addition and not a subtraction, unlike last time," Danny said, as he thought back to the incident with the lunch lady ghost. "Exactly. No reason to lodge a complaint this time," Sam said, as she had hoped that having more options was at least a better compromise than just taking away the meat. Before Tucker could respond to this, he spotted Himawari, who was looking at them, causing him to smile. "Hello, new fish," he said with a smile. "Never gonna happen," Himawari said with a scoff at this, as she rolled her eyes. "Oh, come on. At least give me a chance," Tucker said with a smile at the new girl, as he stood up to approach her table. Before Himawari could respond to this, however, what looked like black and white striped tentacles came out from the shadows under the table Tucker and his friends were using and quickly tied Tucker's shoelaces together, causing the teen to fall flat on his face. "Nice fall, Techno Geek!" Dash yelled from his table with the other popular kids. Oh," Danny said, as white smoke came out of his mouth, as teens suddenly started yelling in a panic as a green female ghost wearing a lunch lady uniform appeared. This was the ghost called Lunch Lady. "Fake meat? Burgers are sacred," the lunch lady yelled, as what looked like all kinds of meat flew at her and covered her up, causing her to turn into a meat monster. "Who's the pissed-off lady?" Himawari asked, as she looked at the ghost as it roared, causing all the teens to head for the door in a panic. "It's a ghost, that's obviously mad about the fake meat option," Tucker said, as he got to his feet. "Oh, come on. I didn't even take away anything this time," Sam yelled at the lunch lady. This just caused the lunch lady to roar at them, obviously not happy with this response. "I think that's our cue to leave," Danny said with a pointed look at his friends. "That works for me. Come on, new girl," Tucker said to Himawari, as he led the way to the door. Himawari got up to follow, but she looked for any sign of Naruto and paused, as she saw him taking cover nearby, before he saw her and nodded at her. Himawari signed at this, before she nodded back and followed her fellow teens out of the restaurant. Naruto then stood up and made a few hand signs, before his prayer bead started to glow with a blue aura, and after a few moments, the entire area around the outside of the restaurant started to glow with the same aura. "Hey, what is this?" the lunch lady yelled, as she looked around at the new aura. "It's a spiritual barrier to keep people with no spiritual talent out of the area and from seeing what happens in here, so I can exorcise you in peace," Naruto said with a calm tone. "And who are you, boy?" the lunch lady asked, as she towered over Naruto. "Naruto Uzumaki, at your service," Naruto said with a slight bow of his head, as his hands turned into what looked like animal claws complete with reddish-orange fur. "Uzumaki," the lunch lady roared out, as she threw her fist down at Naruto, before the blonde vanished in a yellow blur, zipping past the lunch lady, running around in all directions, causing mass confusion. Lunch lady moved her hands out, sending meat patties, steak, chicken and fish towards Naruto, who smirked at this, before he ducked, as several knives and forks pierced the meat, nailing it to the ground, as several trash cans lifted off the ground, smashing into the lunch lady, scattering pieces of her meat armor. Naruto then jumped up, flipping through the air, as his claws extended from his fingertips, slashing towards the ghost, as he sliced away the meat covering the bipolar ghost. Naruto jumped off the side walls, launching himself at the lunch lady, striking her with a spiral spin slash, causing her to scream in pain, as she looked down at her skin to see green ectoplasm leaking from her arm. The lunch lady then roared, as she waved her arm backhanding Naruto, sending him flying out the front doors of the restaurant, causing him to flip in mid-air, before his feet changed into what looked like animal legs, complete with orange fur, before he landed against a wall outside in the parking lot and causing the wall he landed against to crack slightly from the pressure, as the lunch lady ghost came out of the restaurant to continue the fight. Himawari, who was across the street nearby, then held up her hand, lifting up several boxes and the large dumpster from the ground. Naruto jumped into the air, launching a powerful spin kick, shooting it straight into the lunch lady, crashing her into the wall nearby. "That's what happens when you make random things float," Naruto said to the lunch lady with a smirk, not realizing who had actually made the objects float. Himawari sighed at this, but said nothing, as she stayed back. Naruto then coated his right clawed hand in a reddish aura, before digging into the pavement, as he raced towards the lunch lady, rearing back his arm and smashing it into the lunch lady, causing her to scream out in pain, as markings began appearing all over her body. Naruto forced more pressure into his attack, creating a shockwave that formed the face of a skull. "Now go back to the afterlife," Naruto yelled, as he slammed his fist into the lunch lady's body, causing her to yell, as the marking on her started to glow, before what looked like a rip in the air appeared behind her and she started to be sucked into it. "Udmn Uzumakis. Curse your family and your interference with us," the lunch lady yelled, as she was dragged through the tear, which soon closed behind her. "May you cross over to the great beyond, instead of coming back here," Naruto said, as his hands and feet turned back to normal as he did a prayer, while the barrier faded away. "Are you done sending Karen back to the afterlife?" Himawari asked, as she approached Naruto. "Yes, and hopefully, she stays there and finds peace," Naruto said as he nodded, ignoring his sister's sparky attitude. "Come on, let's get out of here, before you get asked questions. The last thing you need is to be labeled as a freak, even if our whole family technically are," Himawari said, as she turned around and walked towards Naruto's car. Naruto frowned at this, before he sighed and followed his sister, as he saw that some people were coming back to see why everything had gone quiet. As the two Uzumakis left, Danny, whose hair was now snow white and his eyes were green, as he wore a black uniform complete with white gloves and boots, flew over, while Sam and Tucker were close behind. "What happened, Danny?" Sam asked as she looked at Danny, who had been flying around the barrier, before he made his way back to them. "I have no idea. I was about to fly into the nasty burger, but suddenly, some kind of barrier went up and kept me out of the area, and when it went down, the lunch lady was gone," Danny said, as he hovered above Sam and Tucker. "Well, whatever it was, it screwed with the tech nearby too," Tucker said, as he held up his phone, showing that the security camera footage, which was all scrambled and corrupted, during the time that the barrier was up. "So I went ghost for nothing?" Danny asked, as he looked around in annoyance. "Whatever happened, I'm sure that we can figure it out. For now, let's get out of here," Sam said, as she pointed out some people, who were coming back now that the fight was over. Danny nodded at this, before he flew off, while Sam and Tucker made themselves scarce. With Naruto. After parking the car in front of the house, Himawari quickly got out of the car and headed for the house. "I'm gonna go play in my room, so don't bug me unless it's important," Himawari said with a flat tone, as she approached the door. "Don't play too late, you have school tomorrow." "Oh, and I'm ordering pizza. Any toppings you want?" Naruto asked, hoping to get some kind of interaction with his sister. "Meet lovers," Himawari said, as she went inside. Naruto sighed at this, as he shook his head a bit. "Naruto Uzumaki," a female voice asked, getting his attention. "Yeah, that's me." "Who's asking?" Naruto asked, as he turned to look behind him and saw a teen girl with blue eyes and long orange hair with a blue headband. She wore a black long-sleeved V-neck shirt, aqua pants and black flats. "Hello. I'm Jazz Fenton, fellow junior at Casper High. I'm also your neighbor from across the street." Mr. Lancer told me that you're starting school tomorrow and he said some of your grades could use improvement, so he asked me to tutor you, Jazz said, as she held out her hand to Naruto to greet him. Naruto blinked in surprise at this, before he smiled at Jazz and took her hand. It's nice to meet you, Jazz. I'm Naruto Uzumaki he was saying, before being cut off. Hands off my daughter, you little punk, a male voice yelled, getting the two teens' attention. Naruto looked behind Jazz and saw what looked like a large fat man wearing an orange and black jumpsuit, with a woman next to him wearing a blue and black jumpsuit with red-tinted goggles. These were Jack and Maddie Fenton, who were Danny and Jazz's parents. Dad, he's just being polite, for crying out loud. Jazz said, as she looked at her father with a scowl. He's just wanting you to think that, as he could be a ghost in disguise, Jack said, as he took out a scanner and started to scan Naruto with it. Ghosts? Naruto asked curiously, as he looked at Jazz. They're ghost hunters. They are harmless, though mostly, Jazz said, as she looked at her father with a look of annoyance. Sorry about my husband, he's quite suspicious of anyone new, considering our job, Maddie said. It's fine and I'm not exactly bothered by you guys being interested in ghosts. My family actually has history with spirits and apparitions, going back to the feudal era, Naruto said with a smile, as he waved his hand dismissively. This got looks of surprise from the three Fentons. Are you here to take our job, you little punk? Jack asked, as he looked at Naruto with suspicion. Jack, back off, or no fudge, Maddie said with a firm tone. Upon hearing this, Jack quickly backed away from Naruto. Anyway, he's a new student, along with his little sister at the high school, and Mr. Lancer asked me to tutor him a bit, to get his grades up, Jazz said, as she looked at her parents. Yeah, my little sister Himawari will be starting her freshman year and I'll be a junior with Jazz, Mr. and Miss Fenton, Naruto said with a nod at Jazz. Ah, and where are your parents? Jack asked, as he looked around the area a bit. This made Naruto pause for a moment, before he frowned. It's just me and my sister, sir. Our parents sadly passed away a few years ago, so our grandparents paid for us to move here, for a fresh start for us, Naruto said with a calm tone. This caused Maddie and Jazz's eyes to slightly widen in surprise, while Jack looked surprised at this. Sorry to cut this short, but I need to order dinner. I'll be in touch to set up tutoring, Jazz, Naruto said to Jazz, as he walked towards the house and quickly entered it. Nice job, Dad, Jazz said, as she gave her father a look that said she was not happy with him. What? I didn't know. Jack said as he frowned at this, as while he didn't like a teen boy around his daughter, he wasn't one to insult his parents being dead. We know, dear. Maybe Danny can make friends with his little sister, I'm sure she could use some friends, Maddie said, as she pushed Jack back towards their house. Well, better Danny and his friends over the popular kids, Jazz said with a scoff, as she knew that the popular crowd wouldn't be as understanding of the new student situation, as much as her little brother and his friends. With Himawari. Himawari walked into her room and locked the door. She then made her way towards the windows, closing the curtains till her room was covered in darkness. She then approached her desk and placed her book on it, revealing the title of the book, which said, Handbook for the Recently Deceased, on it. Though I know I should be weary, still I venture someplace scary. Ghostly haunting I turn loose, Beetlejuice Beetlejuice Beetlejuice, Himawari said, as she looked up from her desk. Suddenly the floor of Himawari's room began lightly shaking, with lightning crashing through the windows, as strong winds blew them wide open. Loud laughter began filling the room, as a fissure formed within the floor of the room and a ghost-white figure emerged jumping from the ground, kicking his feet up and thrusting up his fist, laughing with mad glee. He had green hair and wore a black and white striped suit. Hey Beetlejuice. Are you up for a few rounds? Himawari asked with a grin, as she jerked a thumb at the TV, where a PlayStation 5 was connected. It's show time. Beetlejuice smirked, before landing in front of Himawari, who handed him a controller. Flashback, about a month ago. Himawari sighed in annoyance, as she sat in the front row of the studio audience, who was watching a taping of a paranormal activity show. More specifically, Himawari was watching her brother, who was talking to the host of the show, doing an interview about his family's history as spiritual mediums. Said host was an older woman who had medium-length black hair with pointed bangs with her hair in a half ponytail. She was perpetually dressed in black. This was Lydia Dietz. Well, I must say, it was fascinating to find out that your family has such a history of dealing with ghosts and apparitions, Lydia said with an exaggerated spooky tone, as she looked at the audience. This got some applause from the audience, but Himawari merely rolled her eyes at this, as it was obvious to her that Lydia was simply putting on an act for the audience. So tell me, Mr. Uzumaki, do you and your family still dabble in the world of the dead? Lydia asked, as she looked at Naruto. Well, occasionally, we get called to take a look at places that people think are haunted, Naruto said, as he slightly chuckled. And have you personally seen any spirits? Lydia asked curiously, as the audience looked at Naruto, waiting for his answer. But before he could answer, a loud screaming noise was heard, making everyone jump in surprise. Ah, I'm afraid that we are out of time. But I want to thank you for being a guest on my show, Mr. Uzumaki, Lydia said, as she stood up from her seat and looked at Naruto, while the audience groaned at the show's ending. You're welcome, Miss Dietz, Naruto said, as he too stood up and held out his hand for her to shake, which she took to shake as the show ended. As the audience got up from their seats, Himawari walked towards Naruto, who was still talking to Lydia. Ah, so this is your little sister that you mentioned? Lydia asked, as her gaze turned to the younger Uzumaki, as she grabbed her bag, which was hanging nearby. Yeah, that's her. Hey sis, did you enjoy the show? Naruto asked with a nod at Lydia, before he smiled at his little sister. It was fine, though you putting on that act for the plebeian masses, kinda makes you come off as a bit of a hack, Himawari said, as she took note that Lydia's tone had completely changed, now that the show was over. Hima, Naruto said, as he sighed at his sister's bluntness. Lydia however slightly chuckled, as she wasn't offended by Himawari's words. If anything, it reminded her a bit of herself, when she was a teen. Did you ask her yet? Himawari asked, as she looked at her brother with a firm tone. Ask me what exactly? Lydia asked curiously, as she looked at Naruto with a raised eyebrow. Well, she wanted me to ask if you were capable of getting into contact with our parents, seeing as all attempts by our family's mediums to contact them have failed. So when Hima found out I was going to be a guest on this show, she decided to come with me, so that she could ask you, seeing as she is actually a fan of yours, Naruto said, as he lowered his voice a bit, so that they wouldn't be overheard, as a typical rule in their family was that if they encountered a fellow medium or someone who was spiritually aware, they would not out them to other people. Lydia nodded at this, as she looked at Himawari. I'm afraid that I'm only capable of talking to spirits who are looking to make their way from the afterlife to the realm of the living, she said. After hearing this, Himawari clenched her fists and scowled, before she turned around and walked away, making her way towards the empty audience seats. Naruto frowned at this and moved to follow after her, but stopped as Lydia played her hand on his shoulder. Let me talk to her. I have a teenage daughter, so I may have a bit more insight than you, Lydia said, as she walked past Naruto towards the younger Uzumaki. Naruto said nothing to this, but he nodded, as he figured this was a good idea. Lydia approached Himawari, who was sitting down on the front seat of the audience seats. What? Himawari asked, as she looked up from the floor at Lydia. I am sorry that I can't help you how you want. But my powers don't exactly come with instructions, Lydia said, as she sat down next to Himawari. So instead of trying to learn, you decide to host some dumb show? Himawari asked, as she slightly scoffed at this. Well, I like to think I give some comfort to others, as I do actually have guests, who have actually encountered spirits or apparitions, Lydia said, as she shrugged a bit. What do you guys get out of this stupid CRP? Himawari asked, as she looked at her open palm and slowly clenched it and opened it again. Well, I would like to think that people like me and your family, do what we do to give comfort to both the dead and the living, while in your family's case try to keep the more dangerous ghosts and apparitions from causing problems. Plus, would you believe that when I first discovered this gift of mine, one of my best friends was a ghost? Lydia said as she lightly chuckled, as she reminisced a bit about the past. A friend, huh? That must be nice, Himawari said with a sigh, as she shook her head a bit, as while she put on a tough front, she did wish she could make friends. But most of her fellow teens back in Japan usually just ignored her, or made fun of her because of her family. Lydia frowned at this, as she recalled how as a young teen, she too felt alone at some point. She then smiled as an idea formed in her head. It looks like my brother is ready to go, Himawari said with a sigh, as she saw Naruto was approaching them. Seeing this, Lydia quickly reached into her bag and pulled out a book with a brown hardcover, which had the title, Handbook for the Recently Deceased, on it. She quickly opened up the front cover as she took out a pen and quickly wrote something down on the first page of the book, before closing the book. Anyway, I'm sure you will be okay, and seeing as according to your brother, you used to be a fan, here, Lydia said, as she held out the book to the youngest Uzumaki. Himawari blinked at this, as she looked at the book for a few moments, before she took it. Thanks, I guess, Himawari said, as she put the book in her own backpack, before she went to follow her brother out of the studio. Lydia watched the siblings leave and smiled a bit, as she thought to herself. Hopefully she reads my old chant out loud. I think Beetlejuice will be good for her, even if he's a bit much, Lydia thought with a smile to herself, as she reminisced a bit about the past, before she walked off. Flashback end the next morning. It was the next morning and currently, the Uzumaki siblings were in Naruto's car, arriving at the high school for their first day of school. Naruto. Jazz called out, as she spotted Naruto. Oh, hey Jazz, Naruto said, as he greeted the redhead. Is this the one whose dad gave you the business? Himawari asked with a raised eyebrow. Naruto fought the urge to face plant at this, as Jazz turned to look at Himawari. Ah, you must be Himawari. Are you ready for your first day? Jazz asked, as she smiled at Himawari, hoping to encourage her. Why, yes. I am ready to start 4 years of living hell, Himawari said with a fake smile, as she approached the school. Naruto groaned at this, before he chuckled sheepishly, as Jazz frowned at this. I'm sorry about her, she's got the Uzumaki wit, as my bachan says, Naruto said, as he rubbed the back of his head. Don't worry, it's fine. I just hope that she at least tries to make some friends, Jazz said, as she led Naruto into the school. With Himawari. Meanwhile with Himawari, she was at her assigned locker, as she opened it and began putting away her stuff for later. But as she opened it, she noticed what looked like a vanity mirror hanging in the back of the locker. More specifically, Beetlejuice was looking back at her with a grin. Hey Ahima. Figured I would throw in something for your locker, so that we can chat while you're in the joint. Beetlejuice said with a grin, as he changed his clothes, so that he was wearing a prison uniform for emphasis. Himawari chuckled at this, as she put her bag into the locker. Thanks BJ, she said, using her nickname for her friend. Oh great, the new kid talks to herself. It looks like Fentard and his group of losers have competition for biggest freak, Dash said with a laugh, as he and several other popular kids walked past her. One was a very well-built Asian teen with short black hair and seafoam green eyes, as he wore the standard uniform of the jocks, which was a red and white Letterman jacket, with a black t-shirt underneath and light blue jeans and white shoes. This was Quan. The second was a female teen who had long black hair and blue eyes while wearing a simple pink CRP top with thin white stripes around each of the short sleeves, dusty blue capri jeggings and white flats. This was Paulina. The final person was another teen girl, who had long blonde hair as she wore a white t-shirt with a thin orange neckline, orange trims with a red number 9 in the middle which appeared like a backwards P, red capri leggings, and white flats. This was Star. Himawari scowled lightly at this, as her eyes narrowed as she watched them walk away. Just 3 words and I'll make their hair turn white, Beetlejuice said, as his outfit turned to normal. We will see, it's only my first day after all, Himawari said with a smirk, as she knew if she let Beetlejuice have his way, he would put the popular kids in therapy. She then closed her locker and walked towards where her first class was, which happened to be English, and was being taught by Mr. Lancer. "Ah, Miss Uzumaki, just in time," Mr. Lancer said as the bell rang, just as the last of the students entered the classroom. "I may as well put in the effort, right?" Himawari asked, as she shrugged at this. "Indeed. Now, take your seat. I do believe there is room next to Miss Manson," Lancer said, as he pointed towards the back of the classroom where Danny, Sam and Tucker were sitting. More specifically, there was a free seat next to Sam. Himawari nodded at this, as she approached the trio and took her seat next to Sam. "Hey, you were at Nasty Burger when the lunch lady ghost attacked, right?" Sam asked. "Yeah. Your desperate friend tried hitting on me," Himawari said with a flat tone of voice. This caused Tucker to chuckle sheepishly at this, as he rubbed the back of his head. "Yeah, sorry about Tucker. He's harmless FYI, Danny said. "It's fine," Himawari said, as she shrugged a bit. "So there's hope?" Tucker asked with a slight grin. Himawari gave a flat look at this, while Danny and Sam both groaned at this. Paulina, who was sitting nearby, took note of Himawari, before scoffing as she talked with Sam a bit. Himawari raised an eyebrow at this, before she looked at Sam curiously. "The queen bee of the school. She probably sees you talking to me as a strike against you," Sam said with a scoff. "Faye, like I give a SHT what she thinks," Himawari said with a scoff at this, as she rolled her eyes at this, as class started. Later with Naruto. It was later in the day and Naruto walked out of his class a few moments after the bell rang for lunch PRD. Not too bad for a first day in a new school, Naruto thought, as he approached his locker to grab his lunch, as he had figured that whether it was Japan or the States, school lunches were most likely not fit for human consumption at all. "Hey, new kid!" Dash yelled out, as he and Quan approached Naruto. "Can I help you?" Naruto asked, as he pulled his bagged lunch out of his locker and closed it, before he looked at Dash and his friend Quan. "Yeah, you can hand over your lunch money, seeing as I'm short," Dash said, as he looked at Naruto confidently. "Sorry, but I brought my own lunch today," Naruto said, as he slightly scoffed at this. "Then I'll take that instead," Dash was saying, as he reached out to take Naruto's bagged lunch, before Naruto grabbed his wrist, stopping him. "That's not happening," Naruto said as he narrowed his eyes at this, showing that he wasn't going to be intimidated by Dash. "Hey, you look familiar. Didn't I see you on that ghost house show?" Quan asked, as he looked at Naruto. "Indeed you did. The name's Naruto Uzumaki," Naruto said, as he introduced himself, while letting go of Dash's wrist. "Wait, he was on that freak show? You actually believe in that ghost CRP, like Fentoad's parents?" Dash asked, as he looked at Naruto with a raised eyebrow. "Look, as fun as it would be to lower my IQ by talking to you, I have a lunch to eat. So if you excuse me," Naruto said, as he walked past Dash and Quan. "Hey, I'm not done talking to you, Dash," Dash was saying, as he grabbed Naruto's shoulder, but stopped, as Naruto turned and glared at him, his eyes going from blue to orange and slitted, as if warning him. Whatever," Dash said, as he let go of Naruto's shoulder. Naruto nodded at this, as his eyes went back to normal, as he walked away from Dash. "What the heck was that?" Quan asked his friend, as he too had seen Naruto's glare and needless to say, it had intimidated him too. "It was probably just some trick. I'm not gonna let some freak get one over on me," Dash said, as he narrowed his eyes at Naruto's retreating back. "Hey, I think the new kid has a little sister, who's a freshman along with Fenton and his friends. Maybe we can get even with him, by messing with her," Quan said, as he looked at Dash. "Good idea. Freshmen are always easy to mess with," Dash said with a grin and a nod, as they both made their way towards the cafeteria. Meanwhile with Himawari. Himawari made her way into the cafeteria with her bagged lunch and looked around for a place to sit down to eat. Hey Hima, over here. Tucker yelled from his seat with Danny and Sam. I'm still not planning on going out with you, Himawari said, as she walked over. Well, at least the new kid has some standards, even if her fashion choices stink, Paulina said with a laugh at this, as Himawari walked past her table, where she was sitting with some other popular girls. Do you have something to say to me, Barbie? Himawari asked, as she turned to look at the popular girl. Yeah, the rumors say that your brother and you are from some family of freaks, who deal with ghosts. So I'm not surprised you're sitting with Fenton and his group of losers, Paulina said with a grin, getting some laughs from her fellow popular girls. Huh, okay. I think I have a theory about why you're such a bee, after watching you and hearing you talk a bit, Himawari said, as she nodded at this. What did you say, you freak? Paulina asked, as her eyes narrowed a bit at Himawari calling her a bee. Well, you see, Paulina, you're popular because you developed early and started putting out when you were 12. But now, you can't stand to look at yourself in the mirror, because all you see is a wear. So you pick on Sam and other less popular girls to avoid the inevitable realization that once your body is used up by age 19, you're gonna be a worn-out, SHT skin, burlap sack, that even your stepdad won't want. How's that? Am I in the ballpark? Himawari asked, as she raised an eyebrow inquisitively, while lightly smirking at Paulina. This got stunned silence from everyone in the cafeteria, including the popular kids, more specifically Paulina, whose mouth was hanging open in shock. You know, if you continue to leave your mouth open like that, flies are gonna fly in, Himawari said, as she walked away towards Danny, Sam and Tucker's table. Paulina's face went red from her rage at this, as she started to growl and curse in Spanish under her breath. Hey, anyone see a new girl, whoa, who pissed you off, Paulina? Dash asked, as he and Quan entered the cafeteria, as they walked over to the popular girl's table. She did, Paulina growled out, as she glared at Himawari. Yeah, the new kid just tore her apart verbally, a slightly plump-figured, African-American teenage girl with hunter-green eyes, who wore an orange choker necklace with an oval-shaped pendant, a set of orange-outlined yellow triangle-shaped dangle earrings, a yellow camisole top and an orange skirt, yellow socks and white tennis shoes said. This was Valerie Gray, another popular girl. Oh really? Dash asked, as he made a beeline for Himawari. As this was happening, Danny and Tucker looked at Himawari with looks of awe, as she approached them. We're not worthy. We're not worthy. Tucker yelled out, as he held his arms up and bowed to Himawari a bit. Himawari snorted at this, but smirked a bit, as she actually found this kind of funny. But before she could respond, Dash grabbed her shoulder. Hey new kid, there's a tax on, whoa. Dash was saying, before Himawari grabbed his wrist and twisted it, before she judo flipped him and slammed him hard onto the table in front of her, causing it to break, sending the drinks on the table to spill onto the ground. Pro tip meathead, don't sneak up on me, Himawari said with a glare, as she let go of Dash's wrist. What the hell, you freak? Paulina yelled, as everyone looked at this in shock. What? I'm a black belt. What about it? Himawari asked, as she raised an eyebrow at this, as Quan helped Dash to his feet. This isn't over, Uzumaki. You just made my list, along with your brother. Dash yelled, as he and Quan walked over to the popular table. Himawari's eyes narrowed at this, but before she could respond, she saw in the puddle of soda on the floor was an image of Beetlejuice looking up at her, holding a sign that said, "Do it. Do it, do it, do it." She then smirked, as she looked at Dash and Quan and nodded slightly at this, before she muttered under her breath, "Beetlejuice, Beetlejuice, Beetlejuice. Eh? Do you want some juice, Hima?" Danny asked curiously, as he only caught the end of what Himawari was saying. Dash Baxter and Quan Fan, report to the guidance counselor in room 666, Beetlejuice's voice said over the PA system. Oh, come on. Dash yelled, as he stood up in annoyance at this, as he put down his burger and left the cafeteria along with Quan. Eh? When did we get a new school shrink? Tucker asked curiously, as they all went to a free table nearby. I'm more surprised that we have a room 666. Do we even have that many rooms in this school? Sam asked, as they all sat down. Himawari lightly smirked at this, as she knew she had pretty much sent the two jocks into the lion's den. With Dash and Quan. Okay, room 666. Ah, here we go, Dash said, as he and his friend walked down the hall, and after a few moments, they found a door which was labeled 666 in the top center. The two teens entered the office and saw that it was a very nicely furnished office, with a sofa along one wall and a desk, with what looked like a man sitting in a chair, with its back to them, and on the front of the desk, was a name plate with the name Mr. Juice, psychiatrist on it. Mr. Juice? Quan asked, as he and Dash sat down on the couch. The chair spun around, and sitting in the chair was Beetlejuice, who was wearing a sweater and jeans, along with some glasses. What the hell? Dash yelled, as he and Quan were surprised to see the pale man with mold growing on his skin. Eek! Beetlejuice yelled out, which caused both teens' mouths to be instantly sewn shut. This caused the two teens to grab at their mouths in a panic. Now, first of all, I want you two to know that this is a safe space. So feel free to express yourselves, okay? I sense that there's an enabler here, but we will get to that, Beetlejuice said, as he got up out of his seat and walked around the desk to the front of it, so that he was in front of the two teens, before he looked at Quan with a knowing look. Dash and Quan looked at each other in a panic, as they both tried to get their mouths free of the string that was keeping it shut, so they could call for help. Okay, I want you both to dig deep and spill your guts. Who wants to go first? Beetlejuice asked, as he held out his hands and looked at the two teens, who both looked bewildered at this. No. Okay, then I will, Beetlejuice said, before he opened his shirt, causing his guts to literally spill out of his stomach and onto the coffee table between him and the two teens. Dash and Quan both gave muffled screams at this, as they continued to try and free their mouths. See? I'm willing to do the work, Beetlejuice said with a grin, as he closed his shirt. As this happened, Dash and Quan finally got their mouths freed, by grabbing the ends of the string and pulling them, freeing their mouths. This can't be real. Dash yelled, as he and Quan jumped back behind the couch. Yeah, it's just a figment of our imagination. Quan yelled out in a panic, as he nodded his head rapidly. Really? Then, is this a figment of your imagination? Beetlejuice asked, before he made a scary face, complete with him roaring and bat wings protruding out of his face. Outside the office. As this was happening, Lancer was making his way back to class, as lunch was going to end soon, and as he walked past a certain door, he heard yelling coming from the other side, before the door burst open, as Dash and Quan slammed into him, sending them both to the floor. What in the name of mice and men is going on? Lancer yelled, as he stood up and dusted himself off, before looking at the two teens, while the hallway was filling with students leaving the cafeteria, including Danny, Sam, Tucker, and Himawari. It was a ghost. Dash and Quan yelled, as they both pointed into the office, which was just a janitor's closet. I gotta say, I expected jocks in the States to be tougher than this, Himawari said with a knowing smirk, as she crossed her arms, while the rest of the students laughed at this. Okay, you two, we're gonna have a talk in my office now, Lancer said with a firm tone, as he grabbed Dash and Quan and dragged them towards his office. Sir, I swear it was a ghost, Dash said, as he and Quan were dragged off. Yeah, he was a pale man with mold growing on his skin, Quan said with a nod. I don't want to hear it. Now march. And all of you get to class. Lancer yelled, as he led the two teens to his office. As everyone went to class, Sam looked at Danny with a slightly raised eyebrow, silently asking him. My ghost sense didn't go off. So I'm gonna guess it was just them pulling something and it went wrong, Danny whispered, as they moved to catch up with Himawari and Tucker. Himawari meanwhile raised an eyebrow at this, as she had overheard this. Ghost sense. Heh, like that's gonna work on Beetlejuice. He's way too good at concealing his presence for that. Though I'm surprised there is someone with talent on tracking spiritual activity here. I should probably tell Big Bro about it, she thought to herself. Hey sis, are you okay? What's this I heard about you cussing out someone and judo flipping someone in the cafeteria? Naruto asked, as he approached them, along with Jazz. Himawari groaned at this. Never mind, let him figure it out on his own, she thought with a scowl. Oh, that was classic. She sent Dash through a table. Danny said with a grin at this, along with Tucker. That's not a good thing, bro, Jazz said with a frown at this. Dash. Okay, you get a free pass, Naruto said after a few moments of thought. This caused Jazz to face plant into the floor in surprise, while Danny, Sam and Tucker burst out laughing at this. I'm guessing you'd already met that meathead? Himawari asked with a smirk at this. Never you mind. Now, you and your friends get to class, okay? Naruto said, as he chuckled a little at his little sister. We're not at friend level yet, Himawari said, as she and the others walked towards their next class. The keyword is yet, Sam said with a smile, as while Himawari put on a tough front, she could tell they were getting to her. Are you okay with her attacking Dash? Jazz asked Naruto, as they both went to their own class. Moreover, I'm okay with her defending herself. I mean, after meeting that guy, I can already tell he started it and is lucky he only got judo flipped, Naruto said. You're not a fan of bullies, huh? Jazz asked, as they entered their class. Well, my bachan says that Uzumakis don't take SHT from anyone, living or dead, Naruto said with a smile at this. Jazz shook her head at this, but lightly chuckled as their class started. Later after school. It was after school and Himawari and the others were leaving, along with the other students. Ah, sweet freedom from prison, Himawari said with a sigh of relief. Preach, Tucker said with a nod, as he held up a fist at this. So Hima, I had a question, Sam said, as they all sat at a table nearby. What's up? Himawari asked curiously, as she raised an eyebrow at Sam. I recall seeing your brother on this show a few weeks back and Dash, Sam was saying, before she was cut off. Yes, my family are from a long line of spiritual experts. So is this where you mock me? 'Cause if so, just say it now, so that I can shove you through a wall, Himawari said, as her eyes slightly narrowed at this. Whoa, whoa. No need for that killer, Tucker said, as he held up his hands in a peaceful manner. Yeah. I mean, my parents are ghost hunters and I'm seen as a weirdo for it, so I can relate, Danny said, as he shrugged. Yeah, and as you saw, I'm not exactly popular, because of the whole goth/vegan thing, Sam said, as she too shrugged. So relax girl, you're a loser, just like us, Tucker said with a grin. Himawari blinked in surprise at this, before she lightly chuckled as she relaxed. Hey, did you guys ever see any hot chicks as ghosts? Tucker asked with a grin, while Danny and Sam groaned at this. No idea, my brother is the expert, and really? You're moving on from me already? I'm so hurt, Himawari said with heavy sarcasm lacing her words. This got laughs from Danny and Sam, while Tucker looked surprised at this, before he too joined in laughing. Okay, maybe they are not so bad, Himawari thought, as she lightly smiled a bit at her new friends, as they got up to go get something to eat. As they did this, a whisper of smoke came out of Danny's mouth, making him pause. Guys, I need to go. I'll meet you all later at the Nasty Burger, Danny said, before he quickly ran off. What's his deal? Himawari asked Sam and Tucker curiously. Homework/diarrhea, Sam and Tucker said, both saying what they thought of first, before they looked at each other, with Sam looking at Tucker like he's an idiot. Himawari raised an eyebrow at this, before they heard what sounded like yelling nearby, as what looked like teachers and students were running from what looked like a robotic ghost appeared. It was all black with green circuitry, a red circle on the chest and a green face with red eyes and mouth. Finally. Technus, the MSTR of all technology, will finally, hey. Technus was yelling, before a green blast hit him in the back of the head, making him grab the back of his head, before he turned around, seeing Danny floating in his ghost form. You really have to do this when I am having fun with my friends, Technus? Danny asked, as he held up a glowing hand. Foolish, ghost child. I am the MSTR of technology. I do what I feel like and you will stay out of my way. I. Technus was yelling, before his face started flickering and his words started to stutter. Danny asked curiously, as unseen to him, a barrier formed around the area to keep humans out. Well, this should be easy, considering my barrier not only traps spirits, but it also makes technology shut down, Naruto said, as he walked towards the two ghosts, while cracking his fingers. Who are you? Technus asked, as his body twitched. Naruto Uzumaki, spiritual expert. I'll be sending you back to the afterlife now, Naruto said, as he looked at Technus. Uzumaki. Stay out of this. Technus yelled, as he charged at Naruto and raised his fists up, ready to crush him. Get back. Danny yelled at Naruto, as he knew he wouldn't get to Naruto in time. Naruto sighed at this, before his hands and feet turned into claws, as he grew several fox tails while a pair of fox ears appeared on top of his head. Before in a flash of light, Naruto had run past Technus and his claws were held out, as if he had swung them. A second later, Technus' robot body started to spark, before he fell to pieces, obviously sliced by Naruto's claws. Whoa, Danny said, his eyes widening at this display of speed from Naruto. Naruto then turned to look at Technus' destroyed body and saw what looked like an old man with white hair, green skin, and wearing a lab coat floating out of the destroyed body. Do you have any idea how long it took to gather that tech, you little, ga? Technus was yelling, before Naruto slammed his claws into him, causing what looked like red ruins to appear on Technus. Go back to the afterlife in peace, Naruto said with a firm tone, as a tear in space appeared behind Technus. It. Technus yelled, as he was sucked back into the afterlife. Danny watched this with a look of shock on his face. Now, as for you, Naruto said, as he turned to look at Danny and held up his claws. Whoa. I was trying to stop him. Danny yelled in a panic, as he waved his hands. Really? Naruto asked, as he raised an eyebrow at this. Yeah, it's kinda my job. I have been dealing with the ghosts causing chaos here for a few months now, Danny said, as he floated down to look at Naruto. Well, USCK at your job, considering I was sent here to find out what's causing all the high spiritual activity in this town, Naruto said, as he turned back to normal. Wait, someone sent you here? Who? Danny asked curiously. My family, of course. We keep track of spiritual activity and make sure spirits and apparitions who cause the worst kind of chaos get sent back to the afterlife. We tend to leave benevolent spirits alone though, so if you're just trying to help, then I can see letting you go, as long as you stay out of trouble, Naruto said, as he made a hand sign, which lowered the barrier. I wonder if the ghost portal is what got their attention, Danny said, as he mused to himself a bit. Ghost portal? Naruto asked, as he looked at Danny with a firm look. And that's my cue to leave. Later. Danny yelled, before he took off into the sky in a hurry, but not before hitting a tree branch, making him yell in pain, before he turned intangible and kept going. Naruto sighed at this and went to go to his car, but paused, as he spotted a wallet on the ground. Spirits have wallets? He asked, as he picked up said wallet and after thinking about it, he opened it and took a look at the ID inside for a few moments, before his eyes widened in surprise. Later that night. Dash and Quan pulled up to the locked gate, as the blonde jock pulled out a pair of wire cutters, chopping off the lock. Okay, are you ready? Dash asked his fellow jock. Are you sure about this, dude? Quan asked with a nervous tone, as this mansion gave him the creeps. Are you gonna be a chicken and run away, or do you want to prove to the school we aren't wusses after what happened today? Dash asked Quan, who gave a deep gulp, but nodded as the duo quickly made their way to the abandoned mansion. Dash kicked open the door, carrying a lamp, lighting the room, as they both looked around. "Man, what a dump," Dash said, looking around at the dust and cobwebs covering the house. "Okay, remember, we look around, we take a few selfies, we leave," Quan said, as he took out his phone. "Man, do you actually buy that junk about this place being haunted?" Dash asked, when suddenly, they heard a creak and quickly turned in that direction. "Hello," a young male voice said, which echoed in the massive room. "Who's there?" Dash yelled as he looked around for who had spoken. "I'm afraid that I can't answer that," the young voice said. "Why not?" Quan asked, raising an eyebrow at this. "Well, it's kinda hard to explain, the young male voice said, as he trailed off nervously. "Are you a caretaker or something?" Quan asked curiously, as he figured a mansion this size might have one of those. "No," the young voice said. "Are you a homeless person?" Dash asked, deciding to ask questions too. "No, not exactly," the young voice said. "Are you a burglar?" "If you are, I'm armed," Quan said, pulling out a baseball bat. "Yeah, so come out, or we'll call the cops and have you arrested for trespassing," Dash shouted, only to receive a soft chuckle. Okay. "Geez, calm down." "So here I come," a voice said, as the two teens looked up to see a white wisp sliding down the grand staircase's railing, before he flew off it and stopped just a few inches in front of them, revealing a small young ghost. "Hi, I'm Casper," Casper said, as he waved and smiled, greeting the two bullies. Dash and Quan stood still for a few minutes before they broke out in a loud scream of panic. No, don't scream, otherwise you'll," Casper was saying, with a nervous look and tone. But it was too late, as Casper watched as a mass of darkness, wind and lightning gathered in the center of the staircase, with 9 pairs of eyes opened within it, as it morphed into a giant mass of wispy images roaring in rage, causing both Dash and Quan to scream even louder, before bolting out of the house. And as they ran out, 3 voices were heard crackling in delight, before the door closed behind them. With Naruto. It was the next day and Naruto and Himawari were in Naruto's car, on their way to school. "So are you officially friends with Danny and his friends?" Naruto asked, as he parked the car in the parking lot. "Depends. Are you friends with Jazz or is her father still giving you the business?" Himawari asked with a raised eyebrow. "Hey, that blaster wasn't even loaded, at least I hope it wasn't. Anyway, the reason I ask is because I found this," Naruto said, as he held up Danny's wallet. "And you want me to return it?" "Sure, no problem," Himawari said with a shrug, as she took the wallet. "I found it after that ghost kid dropped it, before he flew off, after I'd lowered the barrier, after that fight with that tech ghost," Naruto said with a firm tone. "Ah hell. That explains him whispering about a ghost sense," Himawari said with a groan at this, as now that she thought about it, Danny was a dead ringer for that ghost kid. "Wait, you didn't mention this before?" Naruto asked, as Himawari got out of the car. "This is your job, not mine," Himawari said with a shrug, as she slammed the car door shut, before walking away. "Well, I could hire you as my assistant," Naruto said, as he got out and followed after her, after locking his car. "Oh, please. Like I need the headache. I want some kind of life outside of this CRP, unlike you," Himawari said with a scoff. "Hey, I have a life outside of this," Naruto said with a frown. Sure you do. Join an after-school activity and make a friend first," Himawari said with a scoff, as she walked towards the school. "Hey, Jazz counts as a friend," Naruto said with an annoyed tone, as he watched his sister enter the school. "After my dad threatened you with that blaster. You're either stubborn or have a thick head," Jazz said, as she announced her presence behind Naruto. A bit of both. Are we still on to study after school?" Naruto said with a sheepish chuckle at this, getting a chuckle from Jazz. "Ah, Mr. Uzumaki, there you are. I was looking for you, Mr. Lancer said to Naruto, getting his attention, as he approached the two teens. Please tell me this isn't about my sister, Naruto said with a groan, as he knew that while here, he was her legal guardian. Not right now, Mr. Uzumaki, though we will be talking about the table she broke during her encounter with Mr. Baxter later, Mr. Lancer said with a firm tone. Naruto groaned at this, as he should have known this would get back to Lancer. Anyway, I wanted to tell you that at the recent parent-teacher meeting, it was decided that all students are required to have at least one extracurricular activity. So you and your sister will be needing to sign up for one within a week, or I'll have to pick for you. I do believe the book club has openings, Lancer said, as he walked away from Naruto. Naruto groaned at this, as while he wasn't against reading, he knew asking Himawari to join a club like that was asking for trouble. Any ideas what Himawari would like in an activity? Jazz asked curiously, as she and Naruto approached the school to go to their first class. I have no idea, she mostly keeps to herself when not reading or playing her games, Naruto said, as he shook his head at this. With Himawari. Meanwhile with Himawari, she was approaching her locker, but before she got to it, she noticed Tucker nearby who was being harassed by Dash and Quan, the blonde of the duo having the tech teen against his locker. Seeing as I'm still a laughing stock after yesterday, we're gonna take it out of your hide, Foley, Dash said, as he held Tucker by the front of his shirt. Hey, I didn't tell you and Quan to go snooping around Whipstaff Manor, Ticker said with a nervous look on his face. So it was you who told everyone about that, you loser, gah. Dash was growling, before the back of his head was grabbed and then slammed against the locker, causing him to drop Tucker. I'm really getting tired of correcting you, meathead, Himawari said, as she grabbed Dash's wrist and put him in a hold, while keeping his head against the locker. Hey, let him go you freak Dash, Quan was saying, as he approached Himawari from behind, before Himawari spun around, throwing Dash into Quan and sending them both to the floor. There, I let him go. Now leave us alone, or I'm gonna send you to the nurse or worse, Himawari said, as she crossed her arms and narrowed her eyes at the two bullies. If you think I'm not above hurting a chick, then you're in for a surprise Uzumaki, Dash growled out, as he stood up and glared at Himawari. The only thing that surprises me is that you can complete a full sentence. Now, if you excuse me, we have a class, Himawari said, as she shoved past Dash and Quan, while dragging Tucker behind her into a classroom, before she slammed the door shut behind her. Oi, don't walk away from me, you little Dash, Dash was saying as he went to follow the younger Uzumaki, before he froze, as he saw in a reflection on the window an image of Beetlejuice, looking back at him and Quan. Hey, how are ya? Beetlejuice asked with a mad grin, which showed off his green teeth that had some bugs in them. Gah-ah-ha, the two bullies yelled, before they ran away from the door like bats out of hell were chasing them. In class with Himawari. Seeing as they were early for class, Himawari and Tucker sat down in their seats. Thanks for the save Hima, Tucker said, as he sat down. No problem, but you should probably grow a spine, Himawari said, as she looked at Tucker. I would, but they are popular and if I retaliate Dash, Tucker was saying, before being cut off. So what? You still have more self-worth than them, so man up, Himawari said, as she opened up her backpack and started to go through it and after a few moments, Himawari spotted Danny and Sam approaching them to sit next to them. Here, you dropped this, fly boy, Himawari said, as she tossed him his wallet. I have no idea what you're talking about, Danny stuttered out, as he caught his wallet. Oh, don't bother. My brother found your wallet, after you dropped it as your alter ego, Himawari said with a scoff. Oh geez, he knows too. Tucker said, as he winced a bit at this. He's not gonna send him back to the ghost zone, is he? Sam asked, as she sat down. Pfft, ghost zone. That's what you call it? Himawari asked with a scoff. Well, what do your family call it? Tucker asked, as he figured that Himawari's family would have a term for the ghost zone. The afterlife, of course. Though depending on what part of the afterlife you're talking about, it can go by different terms, Himawari said, as she shrugged slightly. Such as? Sam asked with a raised eyebrow. Later, as I'm more curious how you ended up with your little gift. I'm gonna guess you weren't born with them, like most people in my family business is, Himawari said, as she looked at Danny. Explain later, class is starting, Sam said, as the bell rang, as the class started to fill with other students and the teacher. Fine with me. But FYI, you're not on my brother's hit list, seeing as you're human and not evil. So take a breath, for crying out loud, Himawari said, as she took out her school book, referring to how Danny looked really nervous, now that he knew she and her brother knew about his secret. Danny sighed in relief at this, as he, Sam and Tucker took out their own books for class. At lunch. Later at lunch, Himawari and her friends sat at their table, eating their lunch while talking. Okay, so let me get this straight, you were messing around with something in your parents' lab and ended up getting ghost powers? Himawari asked, raising an eyebrow at this. Yeah, pretty much, Sam said, as she nodded at this along with Tucker. Is this normal in your edge of the woods? Danny asked curiously, as he was curious if Himawari's family had encountered this kind of thing before in their history with the paranormal. Oddly enough, no. Most people our family have encountered, who have powers, were born with them, not falling but backwards into them, Himawari said, as she shook her head at this. Oh, what about witches? Have you seen any of them? Tucker asked with a grin. No idea. I only know a bit of our family's history, as I don't really give a SHT, Himawari said with a shrug. Ah, so you're not looking to join the family business? Tucker asked curiously. Nope, not really. It's more my brother's job, Himawari said, as she jerked a thumb at a nearby table, where Naruto and Jazz were sitting. So, you're not a fan of ghosts? Sam asked curiously. Nah, I don't really care either way. I just don't go looking for trouble, Himawari said, as she shrugged again. So what exactly is your brother's job? Danny whispered quietly, as he figured that he should keep this on the down low. Oh, my ears are burning, Naruto said, as he announced his presence behind the teens. Gah! Danny yelled in surprise at this. Really? Ghost powers and you get scared easily? Himawari asked with a raised eyebrow at Danny. So you had questions? Naruto asked, as he sat down at their table. Yeah. What exactly is your job? Tucker asked, as he looked at Naruto curiously. Yeah. Danny said something about you sending ghosts back to the ghost zone, but that can't be all you do, Sam said, as she looked at Naruto. Well, basically our family has been dealing with spirits and apparitions, and our job has two parts, Naruto said, as he held up two fingers. 1. Sending the chaotic ones back to the afterlife, Danny said, as he remembered what happened with the lunch lady and Technus. Right. And the second part of our job is to comfort the spirits of the dead, until they pass on to the great beyond, Naruto said, as he held up two fingers again. Wait, the great beyond? Danny asked, raising an eyebrow at this. Okay, lesson time, Naruto said, as he took out a pad of paper and started drawing on it, making what looked like a makeshift map of what looked like purple doors and stairs with green windows and rocky caverns. Whoa, what's that? Tucker asked, as he looked at the map Naruto had drawn. It's the afterlife, or what some of the spirits and apparitions have described it as to the mediums back home, seeing as none of us have ever actually been there, Naruto said. Get to the point already, bro, Himawari said with a bored tone of voice. Right. Okay, so the afterlife is made up of two sections, one is for the spirits of the dead, who are either waiting for their assigned haunting ground or working in the afterlife. And the other section is for the natives of the afterlife, Naruto said, as he pointed out a certain section of the map. Whoa, time out. The natives? Tucker asked. Yeah, we call them apparitions. They are supernatural beings that can be created from emotions and high psychic activity. And they can also be your beings from folklore, like Naruto was saying, before he was cut off. Okay, we get it bro. You deal with power-hungry morons and play therapist and in the worst-case scenario both, Himawari said with a tone of complete boredom. Hey, this is actually interesting, Hima. We actually don't know a lot about this stuff, Tucker said, as he frowned a bit at this. Look, I really don't want to talk about this CRP, so can we please change the subject? Himawari asked with an annoyed tone of voice. Okay then, have you found an after-school activity? Naruto asked, as he looked at his sister. This got a look of surprise from Himawari, as she hadn't been expecting this. Oh yeah, I had heard that Lancer was making it mandatory for all students to have an after-school activity now, Sam said with a sigh. And if you don't choose one yourself, he'll choose one for you, Danny said with a nod. Pro tip, don't let him pick one, he's a big fan of the book club, which he is in charge of, Tucker said, as he took a bite of his burger. Great, just what I need, Himawari said with a groan. Well you could either join the cheer squad Naruto was saying, before he was cut off. Nope, hard pass, Himawari said, as her eyes narrowed at this suggestion. Yeah, we don't need to bury some bodies, as fun as that would be, Sam said as she pointed at Paulina's table, where said teen was wearing a cheerleader uniform, along with Star. Oh, please tell me that we can start our own club or something, Himawari said, as she really didn't want to join any regular after-school club. Are you looking to start your own club? Jazz asked, as she approached them. Yeah, sis wants to avoid Lancer's book club and any of the popular kids, Naruto said with a sigh at his sister. Well, you will need two things to do that, first you need at least 4 members to be an official club, Jazz said, as she looked at them. We've already got that, Danny said as he, Sam and Tucker nodded in agreement, as they too didn't want to deal with the popular kids in the other clubs. And what's the second thing? Naruto asked curiously. You need either a teacher or a senior student to oversee the club, Jazz said, as she remembered the rules. This caused Himawari to look at Naruto with a smirk. What? Naruto asked his sister, as he saw her looking at him. Himawari said nothing, as she nodded her head at Danny, Sam and Tucker, who also smirked, as they realized what she was thinking. Naruto looked from Himawari to the other 3 a few times, before his eyes widened in realization. Oh geez, he said, as he knew that he was cornered. Well, you need an after-school activity, Jazz said with a chuckle at this. Okay, fine. But I'm not doing this, if you guys don't actually have an idea for what this club actually is, Naruto said, as he looked at the freshmen with firm looks, showing that he wouldn't budge on this. Well, this school doesn't have any sports team, Himawari said with a slight smile. You just got so much hotter, Tucker said with a grin at this. Really dude? Her brother is right there, Danny said with a flat tone, as he jerked a thumb at Naruto, while looking at his best friend. Oh, he's fine. I find this hilarious, though I would suggest pulling back. Uzumaki women tend to scar the desperate, both mentally and literally, Naruto said with a chuckle, as his sister made a killing gesture at him. Tucker balked at this reveal, while Danny and Sam laughed at this reaction from him. Anyways, nice try sis, but an esports team isn't happening. Though if you're looking for an after-school activity, I do have a suggestion, Naruto said as he shook his head at his sister, as she lightly scowled in defeat. What are you thinking? Jazz asked curiously. Naruto hesitated at this for a moment, as he knew he had to choose his next words wisely, seeing as he had a feeling that Jazz didn't know about Danny's powers and fighting ghosts. Well, let's hear it bro, or is that old take about Uzumaki males and redheads true? Himawari asked with a slight smirk. Naruto sputtered at this before. He glared at Himawari. Wait, what is she talking about? Sam asked curiously. Ignore her. Anyway, I'm thinking that seeing as this town has some history with spirits and possibly apparitions, I'm thinking we could start a club that could document any reports of supernatural activity, Naruto said, as he gave Danny a look who after a few moments nodded, as he figured he was hinting at helping him with his powers. So alright folks, that's all for today. Stay tuned for part 2. Do subscribe, like and share for more such videos. Also check out the story and author KFB Anime 87 on fanfiction.net. Press the bell icon to be notified first on release. See you in the next video. Till then, goodbye.